morning. A few years ago, Susan and I went up to the top end, up to the Northern Territory to look around Kakadu and other places. We spent a few days either side in Darwin, looking around the city. Two particular events in their history came up again and again. One kind of surprised me and the other overwhelmed me. The first was the bombing of Darwin in the Second World War in 1942, and the devastation of military and civil targets, but particularly ships and planes, and the death toll of somewhere between 240 and 300 people, maybe more, depending on which report you read. We went into a museum that had a virtual reality experience, so with headphones and goggles on, I watched and engaged in this attack, a reproduction of what might have happened. The noise of bombs falling from the sky and exploding, of sirens in the background, of planes, and it was overwhelming. And I couldn't comprehend quite what it was like. It was not what I understood. I'd not really heard the stories before. So it was a little bit of a new experience. The other one, of course, was Cyclone Tracy in 1974, when Christmas night, Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, early Christmas morning, this tropical storm had developed into a full-blown cyclone and blasted through Darwin and devastated much of the city. There were 71 lives lost. Over half the population were left homeless. There was devastation, destruction everywhere. Again, I couldn't comprehend what it must be like. The fear and despair, desperation of people in the midst of a storm, with roofs blowing off and homes being destroyed. I can't comprehend it. And the photos and the reports and the stories of this city devastated and lying in ruins. Both stories showed and revealed, firstly, the despair and the grief and the loss, the pain, the suffering, but then the resilience. As glimmers of hope and defiance and resilience and dreams were given to the people, and they rebuilt the city with plaques and memorials and creative ways of remembering and embracing some of the ruins into the new designs. The city is rebuilt. And I thought of this too as I read other stories this week from across the world, in the wars that are raging around the world, particularly Ukraine and Russia, that invasion, but also Syria, Myanmar, Burma, and many places in Africa and in South America, in other parts of the world where people are striving against each other, where there's guns and bombs and planes and suffering and loss, and people are left homeless, walking away from everything they have and know to start new lives. Sometimes cities and towns and villages are rebuilt, and sometimes people walk away and start again elsewhere. I also read two ancient stories. One, nearly 2,600 years ago, the city of Jerusalem, which has been destroyed and bombed and attacked in many ways over many centuries. But back then it was the Babylonians who came knocking at the wall that surrounded Jerusalem and tried many times, several times, until they finally crashed through the wall and devastated the city. And they took with them back to Babylon the leading citizens and craftspeople into exile and set them to live in this strange land. It was difficult. Songs like the Psalms, Rivers of Babylon, I lay down and wept as I remembered Zion, our home. You ask for songs, but how can I sing the Lord's song in this strange land? into this time of grief and loss and hopelessness came the voices of prophets, prophetic figures, who interpreted the times and the life and gave God's people, these exiles, hope. A glimmer of hope and a dream of what might be. One of those was Isaiah, and we read something of his story this week in one of the sections of Isaiah, coming near the end when the exiles are perhaps about to return, when the Medo-Persians conquered the Babylonians and Cyrus sent them back if they wanted to go. And Isaiah has this beautiful little passage which speaks of hope and says that the day will come when the lamb will lie down with the wolf and the lion will be in their midst and the child, and there'll be peace on earth and peace amongst God's reign and God's people and God's earth. And I guess we look into that and we think, when? When, God? When will this happen? How will it happen? Because the devastation, the fighting, the violence, the warfare seems to continue on, relentless. Isaiah provided that glimmer of hope for that people to return. He and other prophets, and then leaders who went and could see the possibilities of this broken, damaged, busted city. And they brought their creativity and their hard work together, and they rebuilt the city and the temple and their worship and their life. And it was built around this dream and this hope of God, that God would be in their midst. And I guess what it was about was rekindling that dream of God, that hope and vision of God for a world that is inclusive, generously inclusive and loving, built on justice and sharing and equality, not violence and hatred and division. And whilst the people had that vision, they could rebuild their city and rebuild their lives and rebuild their nation. And then the second story comes from about 2,000 years ago, and it's Jesus, the voice of Jesus through Luke's story. And Luke is writing somewhere around 55 years later. And he's using Jesus' words around the temple. And by the time Luke comes, the temple is destroyed. In a war of the Romans and Jews, 66 to 70, this fighting, this bloodshed and the destruction of the temple. And Jesus says there a day will come when not one stone of this temple will be still upon another. But that's not the people of God. That's not the true temple. The temple is God's Spirit in us, leading us, guiding us, nurturing us, giving us life and hope, drawing us together in a community that is about belonging and about hope and about life for all people. It's about this vision of peacefulness, of reaching out to one another, giving a hand up, not pushing people down further. It's about sharing and caring and loving and receiving, caring and sharing and loving. It's about us together as a community, as a world, not just human beings, but the whole creation. This morning we passed again on our daily walk a black snake. We've seen a couple of regulars, and they're beautiful creatures, although I guess many would be frightened of them. And we treat them with respect. We don't go too close. I mean, they don't want to get us too close. They disappear. But these creatures share the earth with us. And they're lovely. And they have their part as we have our part. And I guess that's what the vision is about. Living together on this earth and recognising we're all fellow creatures. And this dream of God is that we would work and live together and help everyone and everything to flourish and have life. That's what the vision is about. And that's what we're invited into. To dream an impossible dream in God. And when we have that love, that life, that hope, that sense of being and purpose that God gives, that vision can become a reality, at least in small ways in our midst. You're invited to join this journey with Jesus, this way of God, this dream of God. You come along.